Hi, we're the Project Kings. My name is Brandon.
I'm Jacob.
And I'm Alex.
So I'm going to start it off with chapter number 2, the project management and information technology context. For time purposes, I'm not going to go over the learning objectives, but these are the learning objectives. Next page. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the systems view of project management. So essentially, when you are going to do a project, you can't think of it as an isolated entity. You have to think of how it's going to connect to every single part of the organization. That's called systems thinking. That sort of thinking. Systems philosophy. This is thinking of things as a system, like our body. There's a whole bunch of different systems in our body, and they all come together collectively and form one unit. And then systems analysis, this is the equation part of it. And then the next slide will go into systems management. So there are three spheres model for systems management. There's a business, organization, and technology. And all of these are very important to consider when you are going to be doing a project. You have to think of the business side, how much things are going to cost. You have to think about the organization, like the culture, the politics in the organization. You have to think of how the technology is going to influence everything. You can't just think of the project as a standalone, isolated thing. You have to consider all of these things and manage these three things. Next page. So these are the four frames of an organization. There's the structural frame, the human resources frame, the political frame, and the symbolic frame. So the structural frame, it deals with roles of and the roles and the goals of the organization. So the roles that everyone in the company plays, and the human resources frame focuses on aligning organization needs with the needs of the people. So like you can't have people working 20 hours a day, even if it's going to help the organization. And then the political frame addresses the politics that usually is revolved around power. You don't want to step on anyone's toes. And the symbolic frame revolves around the meaning of certain things. This is involving like company culture and things like that. Next page, please. So now we're going to dive deeper into organizational structures. And these are the three forms of organizational structures. There's functional, project, and matrix. So on the right, you can see the top one, the functional one. That's the most standard one. So that is just the organization split into different functional aspects of the company, and then there's staff working under those functionalities that are specialized in that. And then there's project based, and then these are companies that they just run a whole bunch of different projects, and that's how the organization is divided. And there's a project manager, then there's a staff under the project manager that gets the project done. And then the matrix is sort of a mix of these two. So there's both sectioned off functional areas, and there's also projects that are done, and there's integration, and you answer to your project manager and to your functional manager. Next page. And organizational culture, this is, like I said, incredibly important when you're going to do a project, because you have to make sure that it's going to fit into the identity of the organization. And these are the 10 characteristics that go into organizational culture. Some sort of things is kind of like for member identity, how much does the common worker identify with the organization? Conflict tolerance, the one like that is like, does the organization like you to question things and to bring up different ideas? Risk tolerance, that's like, how much risk do they want you to take? So all these things, these are the 10 main ones that go into culture, and they're very important to consider when running a project. Next page. Okay, and then this is focusing on stakeholder needs is incredibly important too, as you got to make sure that all the stakeholders, everyone involved in the project is taken care of, including the customers, top management, anyone that's going to be affected by the project at all. And it's very important to have top management commitment on projects, because they're the ones that bring the resources to the project. A lot of times it's a project champion, that's a senior manager that oversees the project and makes sure that it has everything that it needs. And this also helps with meeting the needs of organizational standards when you have top management um, commitment. Next page, please. And now I'm going to talk about project and product life cycles. So These are the four main stages that go into project phases, starting project, organizing it, carrying it out, and then finishing it. Next page. And then there's the product life cycle. These are the different types of product life cycles. We have predictive life cycle. This is when you know the scope of the project early on. And then we have some other ones here. They all have different meanings. And depending on what type of project it is, these are the ones that you're going to be using. There's iterative life cycle, incremental life cycle, adaptive life cycle, and hybrid life cycle. Next page, please. Now, there's a whole bunch of different IT projects, from incredibly complex to incredibly simple, and it's just incredibly vast. And you can even have the same title as someone else in a different IT world, and you can have the same exact title, not even know how to do each other's jobs because it's so diverse. And it's just getting more and more diverse the more integrated our world gets with technology. Next page. And that brings me to this slide. This talks about globalization. So we're obviously becoming very interconnected. We're starting to outsource to other companies. We're doing things virtually, like on Zoom. And the more and more interconnected we all get, the more diverse that IT is going to continue getting.
All right, thank you, Brandon. We're going to jump into project management process groups, which is chapter 3 of the book. Next page, please. Project management process groups, it's really just the grouping of the project's lifecycle. This goes hand in hand with the 10 knowledge areas of project management. Some of those important ones are going to be integration, scope, cost, resources, procurement, and then stakeholder management. These two combined, they're going to work together to accomplish our project's goal, and we'll see later how they actually integrate with each other. Next page, please. So like there are 10 project knowledge areas, there are 5 project management process groupings. Obviously, managing a project is not going to be an easy task, especially if it's going to be a large IT project or anything of the sort. It's not going to be made up by just 1 or 2 people. It's going to be a bunch of different departments, even outside agents being part of that. And because it's human nature, there's not going to be a perfect project ever. So you have to be able to look at the project, see what's going on. And these project process groups are there to act as a safety net so that we catch it and it doesn't fall out into anything. And as we go through these, we'll see that they're not going to be all mutually exclusive. The groups will play hand in hand with each other as the project goes on. Next slide, please. So the first project process is going to be the initiating process. This is going to be your paperwork stuff. This is going to be figuring out what the project is actually going to be. This is basically the blank canvas being started to turn into something. No physical anything is going to happen here. This is literally, we're just going to be brainstorming. We're going to be starting it. This comes before anything. Obviously, you need to have a plan before you can jump into any action. So that's what the initiating process is. And initiating will go out through the entire project. This will be seen in every single process group. Next page, please. The planning process is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to be the backbone of the actual project itself. Next slide, please. So executing process is going to be where we're actually doing the actual project itself. This is where we're going to be physically, tangibly doing what we're trying to do. Obviously, this is where things start to actually move. This is where everything starts to actually be coordinated and allocated. Whereas the planning process, it's putting it, again, pen and paper, trying to figure things out. Executing is actually physically getting it done. Next slide, please. Monitoring and controlling process, this is going hand in hand, again, with executing. However, this is going to be the flip side of it. This is where we're going to actually be taking a look at the project. This is where we're going to be doing our progress reports. This is where we're going to be monitoring our timelines. This is where we're going to be doing the backside of the project, making sure everything's going as smoothly as possible. This is also where we're going to have key members come in, key people, stakeholders come in, take a look and see if things are running up to snuff and how they were expecting the project to look. We can course correct from here if necessary, but again, this is going to be just the inspection. Next page, please. The last one is closing. This is going to be the formal finishing of the project. Again, with the initiation process, this is where we're going to be writing down our papers, making sure everything is done. We're going to be crossing our T's, dotting our I's, making sure everything looks complete. It's all up to the project standards. This is where the project is actually going to be handed over to the client themselves. So this is the finishing of the project process. Next slide, please. So going off of that, kind of summing it up a little bit, each of these processes has its own output. Each of them has something that comes from it. Planning process, you're going to have the project scope, which is going to be what the project's looking like. Executing process, again, is going to be the actual project itself. This is going to be tangible, physical work, whether it's a website, whether it's whatever it needs to be. The monitoring process, we're going to get our performance reports from here, our progress tracks. This is where we're going to be seeing what we're doing. And then the closing process is going to be the formal closure of the project. That's going to be it for the project. That's when we're done with everything. Next slide. Let's get into process management and knowledge and how they go hand in hand, as I was saying earlier. They work together. Obviously, you have to be able to see bigger picture items with this, and you can't be, you can't have no knowledge and try and run through the process, but you also can't have the processes down and have no knowledge, So you have to be able to kind of see both sides of it, understand what each little detail is, because the knowledge areas are the little details in the actual process groupings. So they work together. You're not going to have a complete project without it. It's not going to be very efficient, not understanding how both sides of it work. Next slide. Another thing is going to be IT management policies. This is, again, we're talking IT projects. You have to have policies put in place to actually make sure that things run as smooth as possible. So companies make their own policies because none of these projects are going to be the same. None of them are going to fit the same bill. You're going to have things that can work on both ends. So that's where this comes in. Guide is going to be a standard for it. This is a basic stepping stone. Many companies use it. Many groups use it. This is a point to step from, though. You're not going to use just Guide and then go from there. There's a few other ones that are included too. There's Prince 2, which is projects in controlled environments. The agile method, agile basically meaning that we're just going to go through the entire project, and as it's happening, that's where we'll clean it up. And rational unified process, and then the Six Sigma methodologies. I'm going to hand it off to Alex.
Thanks, Jacob. So I'll go ahead and talk about project integration management in this section. Now, here's the learning objectives. For time purposes, we're going to go ahead and skip through them, and we'll cover them later on in the presentation. Now, getting a little background information on what exactly project integration management is. Now, project integration management coordinates the full range of project management knowledge during the project lifecycle. And really the purpose here is to make sure that every aspect of the project, everyone involved in the project is all on the same page, working together to ensure a successful project completion. Now we look here at the 7 steps of project management or project integration management. We have first developing a charter, developing a project management plan, directing the project management plan, managing project knowledge, monitoring and controlling project work, performing integrated change control, and closing the project. And these 7 steps will be touched upon later in the presentation. Now we look at strategic planning, and this is really a basis for everything. Strategic planning, we've all heard of SWOT analysis, and this again is strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this is really an opportunity for a company to look at what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, what's going to hurt them in the future, and what's going to help them in the future for their business practices. And they take this analysis along with other future trend analysis, and they consider what can we add in the future? What do we have to take away? And this really helps them decide on long-term objectives and potential projects for the future. Looking at the 5 methods for selecting a project, we see 1, focusing on broad organizational needs, 2, categorizing IT projects, 3, performing net present value or other financial analysis, 4, using a weighted scoring model, and 5, implementing a balanced scorecard. Now, these really are measurement methods to see what kind of project do we need, what kind of project is going to fit the objectives that we have. Now, moving on, we have the importance of a project charter. And a project charter is really the basis for establishing the existence of a project. It allows organizations to be able to use organizational resources. It establishes what's our schedule? What are the objectives of this project? What's the budget we can have for this project? It's really a roadmap for things to come. And an effective project charter can lead to an effective project management plan and thus an effective project. Now with the project management plan, we see that with developing a project management plan, it requires effective project integration management, meaning that all knowledge areas are necessary for a successful plan. And some of the inputs for these plans are charters, as I just described, process outputs, enterprise environment factors, and organizational process assets. Moving on to the project execution. And as you'll see, we have an underlying theme of you need effective coordination. Everyone's got to be on the same page. And if everyone is on the same page with an effective plan, you're going to be able to execute effectively and have success. And that's really the underlying theme, as I was saying. And with project plans, it really should be the same people who are going to execute the project. They're going to be the ones planning it. And if you have those two going hand in hand, you're going to have successful results. And moving on to some of the tools and techniques necessary for effective direction and management of project work. First of all, you have expert judgment. Project managers can go to experts, the ones who really do this every day. They know what they're talking about, and they can help and make decisions. Beyond that, meetings. Meetings are essential for any business, any project. Face-to-face, phone, virtual, they're all much more effective than just standard chat conversations or text conversations, because you can't convey what you're actually saying. You need that face-to-face requirement for effective communication. And finally, project management information systems. This is stuff that allows project members and managers to share information with each other back and forth, convey what the objectives of the project are. And this is done through effective project management with information systems. Going on to project knowledge management, we're really talking about two types of knowledge here. We have explicit and tacit knowledge. Explicit is easy to understand. It's words, it's pictures, it's numbers. And this is how projects get done. You're able to communicate with one another, and these are standard ideas that are easy to understand. Now, tacit knowledge is a little more difficult. This is more personalized, individualized knowledge, such as beliefs, values, and standards that people have for themselves. But effective sharing of these ideas can really build camaraderie within a group. So it's very important to build upon this tacit knowledge and effectively share these with your team members. Moving on to monitoring and controlling a project. We see it's very important to monitor and control a project, because all projects they're never going to be perfect, as Jacob said, and you're going to have to adapt to changes. And so that's really the purpose here, is to adapt to what's in front of you. Now, with integrated change control process, this includes identifying, assessing, and controlling changes during the life of a project. Again, it's that another theme is things can change, things adapt. You're going to have to adapt to those changes. And that's what an effective project does. And that's where integrated change control processes and controlling the project, that's where that all comes in, to ensure that these changes are benefiting the project by altering the underlying causes, recognizing the change by keeping track of all objectives and timelines, and controlling the changes when they actually happen. So you have to be flexible. Now, with closing procedures, we touched on them a little bit, but just to go over them one more time, closing procedures are essentially the project's done. The work has been allocated to the proper entities, proper people, and documents are updated, they're finalized, project outputs are allocated and transferred to proper destinations, the project report is finalized, everything is done. Now with software and project integration management, this is crucial. This is, again, the information sharing systems. You have to have these effectively, because in a digital world that we live in now, everything is shared through a cloud. And the benefits of having software integration in your project management plans. You can assist information sharing, you're aiding information presentation, you're allowing for effective information storage, and you're promoting coordination among members. Again, this is the whole process of coordination is key with projects. And finally, considerations for agile and adaptive environments. This is an aspect where team members are more engaged, they're more integrated into the project management roles with respect to they have an increased role in the product planning and the product delivery. While they're also doing technical projects and technical work, they're also integrated into this aspect. And this allows the project manager to establish a collaborative environment for the team members and allows them to promote adaptability among those team members.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Now I'm going to be taking us into chapter 5. Again, we're going to go over the learning objectives. We're going to skip these first two, okay. So first thing we're going to talk about is what is project scope management. So as we've touched already, project scope, this is what we're going to be focusing on in the project, the products that we're going to be coming out with and the processes to make these products. And we have to manage the product scope, the project scope. And in doing that, there are 6 main processes to project scope management. Next page, please. First thing we're going to do, we're going to dive deeper into planning scope management. You have to make a scope management plan. That's what's going to help you manage the scope. And what essentially the scope management plan includes is guidelines and guidance to managing the scope of the project, like how to create a work breakdown structure, if there's changes in deliverables, how to get them accepted, and essentially it takes you every step of the way in the project. Next page, please. Okay, now the next process is collecting requirements. This is one of the most important processes because if there is mistakes, they are the most expensive. So you got to make sure that you got to catch them on early on in the project because the later on it gets, the more expensive it gets. And the way that you find out what needs to be in the deliverables is you do things like you have focus groups, you do interviews, conduct surveys, and with software development projects, the errors are even more costly because they're very expensive. And the way you kind of try to stay away from errors is doing things like prototyping and benchmarking, which is using elements from a previous project and applying them to this current project. Next slide, please. Okay, and the last one I'm going to speak on, the last process is the defining scope. Now, the way that we do this is we do this through expert judgment, data analysis, and you also do this through project scope statements. Now, what a project scope statement has, it at the very least, it defines the scope and it defines the criteria that is acceptable for the scope and detailed information on all the deliverables that are going to be done in the project and the processes that go with them.
Thanks, Brandon. So with the work breakdown structure, really the background around a work breakdown structure is that it defines the total scope of the project. And it organizes, divides the work of the project, and it assists in the planning, scheduling, budgeting, and controlling of the project. So really it's an outline for what's to come for the project. It's an effective project management tool that all projects need to use. Now, some approaches to developing work breakdown structures, we have using guidelines and examples, pretty self-explanatory, using a set of guidelines to develop your work breakdown structure. The analogy approach, you're using a previous successful work breakdown structure as a basis for what you should base your new work breakdown structure on. The top-down approach, you're taking a few or one ideas at the top, you're breaking them down into multiple ideas that are branching off those. Now, the bottom-up approach is the opposite. You're starting with specific tasks at the bottom and you're grouping them up. Now, the mind mapping approach, on the other hand, it begins with ideas. It doesn't focus on the tasks of what's going to happen. It lets those come later. You start with a core idea, you branch off, and then you come up with the tasks. Now, the work breakdown structure dictionary is essentially a document that has all of the items in the work breakdown structure, and it gives a brief summary on each of these work breakdown structure items, and it gives the steps necessary to complete them. And this is really serving the purpose of assisting in establishing an approach for completion for the work breakdown structure. Now, the basic guidelines surrounding the work breakdown structure: one unit of work should only be in one location on the document, on the work breakdown structure. Furthermore, the work content is made up of subsequent work breakdown structure items. You reference the picture on the right, you can see project made up of 3 tasks, and each of those is made up of 3 subtasks and work items. So really you can see that one branches into many. Now, the responsibility of an item falls on one person. This doesn't mean that one person is going to work on the item by themselves. It just means that they're responsible for the completion of it. Going on from that, with the work breakdown structure, pretty simple. It should reflect the work to come. As well, the team members should help develop the work breakdown structure. It's the same principle of you executed it, you should help plan it, you planned it, you should help execute it. It's all about establishing coordination. And again, the work breakdown structure should be described in the work breakdown structure dictionary. Same purpose, the terms need to be defined out. And again, the whole principle of being adaptable to change, that's what the work breakdown structure is about too.
All right, let's finish it up here with controlling the project scope. So as we've been saying along this entire project, they change. Nothing about them is going to stay exactly as you wish. So we can control that. We're not going to be able to do it perfectly, but we are able to do it. We're going to be able to steer them at least using different policies, using different guidelines that we have set forth before it. You can't be efficient with a project if you're not going to be monitoring it and if you're not going to be trying to actively fix it. Variance is going to be a very important tool for us to use. It's going to be able to show us where we sit, how we're actually measuring compared to our actual performance. Next page. One of these other tools that we're going to be able to use is software. We're going to be able to do all of our databasing through there, all of our slides, all of our data sheets, all of our Word document processing, even emails are going to be able to coordinate across different project managers and basically cross those lines. Next page, please. And then finishing it up, as we've spoken a few times, this project, agile environments are huge and important. They're going to allow us to basically go through the project and fix it as we see needed. We're not going to start the project heavy. We're not going to go into it exactly 100% knowing what we're going to do. What we're going to do instead is we're going to go through the project, and as things develop, as things come up, we're going to fix them, we're going to refine it, and we're going to redefine the project. Agile approach is basically going to be the best way to go about it because it's also going to provide for more products because we've been able to account for all those issues. Thank you for listening to our project. That's it.